Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, where we explore big ideas with leading experts on how to grow your brand and business with targeted podcast interviews.
So a couple of weeks ago, I read the Podcast Guesting Manifesto by our guest here, and it struck me. I've heard so many podcast hosts speaking about these things. Paul went and summarized it so well, and I wanted to get him on the show here. So, Paul, welcome. And I guess the first question I have is, what caused you to write your Podcast Guesting Manifesto?
There are probably more untruths about podcast guesting than there are truths about podcast guesting. But regardless of those numbers, nobody does well when you tell them that you're wrong. I've had people tell me that, I've had people say, I don't need to be on shows. I'll just guest on other shows, and I'll make my millions that way. Telling somebody, no, you're wrong, just doesn't work. It doesn't work in politics, it doesn't work in religion, it doesn't work in dating, it doesn't work anywhere. So it doesn't work in podcasting either. So I wanted to create something that would have people kind of reroute their thoughts about this process and rethink things through and whatnot. So the manifesto carries all this gravitas with it and that kind of thing. So I thought I would go there and then really just get the points out. And I think all these points are important. Does a podcast guest match mean that you have to connect on every single one of these levels? Well, that would be ideal. And if you're paying a ton, that should be your goal, but it's not necessary. But if you don't match any of these, and if you start to kind of question what you're doing based on reading this, then my work here is done.
And with any manifesto, it's supposed to start discussion. And as one of our clients, Bix, and I always loved how he said, if you haven't changed your mind lately, how do you know you still have one? So I hope this conversation changes people's paradigm on it. And one of the first things as I looked through your different points, and we'll drill down on them, is this whole idea, are you going for results or just action, right? This whole idea of more, is that what you're going for? Are you optimizing for quantity or quality? And can you dig into that a little bit? Because I think that's a myth that the industry is spreading, because so many of them are getting paid by the podcast. So, it behooves them to put you on every podcast that says yes, and it doesn't necessarily help the host, the guest, or the audience.
But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? Yeah, the prevailing industry promises you get on enough shows and you'll get your word out. And, there's the old, an infinite amount of monkeys with an infinite amount of typewriters, and eventually we get Shakespeare. But this is not what we're going for here. And I get the attraction. Why do all the hard work if you can just sit at home on Zoom and chat with people for a week? Like, I get that premise. I get that excitement, but it's just not the way it works. The truth is in quality, not quantity. And it's quality of your presentation, but it's also quality of the podcast that you're being presented on. And it's quality of the audience that is listening to it, specifically to your message. And it's a bunch of dots that need to be connected with somebody who's interested in connecting the dots, not filling out the form of all the podcasts they can get you on. So if you get on the right show that aligns message, market, audience, all that stuff, it's fantastic, but that ain't easy. And this idea that it's just easy has got to go away.
And it's the marketing message out there, and people are getting brought in by it, right? I can think of one that you can pitch 1,000 podcasts in the time it would take you to reach out to one. Well, that's called spam. Or the client that came to us and said, I want to be on 100 podcasts this month. And I said, why? Oh, because it'll be massive exposure. Well, so will committing a heinous crime, right? By the end of the day, everyone will know you and your middle name. Doesn't mean it's going to help you or your business, right?
And exposure is also what you get when you strip naked and run down the street in the middle of an ice storm. Yeah.
Nobody wants to see me streaking So
me.
let the buyer beware, that caveat emptor, because there was so many of those in there, right? Don't be somebody's guinea pig. It takes art to do this. Is somebody just being an opportunist? That really struck me, and expand on that a bit.
Well, first of all, one thing that's fun. So I run a company called the Podcast Partnership. We produce podcasts for thought leaders. And one of the things we do that's kind of fun is, and it's a survival mechanism. Every single one of the podcasts that we manage, the email address on file all goes to the same email account. So although we have, look at that, I hit the whole table. Although we have, sporting figures, and we have business leaders, and we have financial planners, and we have, all sorts of folk in our group, we will get 25 emails on a day saying that our client is their favorite show and they really should be on it, and the connection's terrible. Your interview valet, you called me about an episode or reached out on social about a thing I wrote called the Guesting Manifesto. That makes sense. If I were to go to you and say, hey, we've been talking about the role of examining what maybe NFTs could do in the podcasting space, very interesting, worth an examination, but it's not content for your show, man. And if we try to force round pegs through square holes, we're going to get nowhere. Now, the sad thing about this is if you went to the local paper, if there are any left, or the local news station, and you said, I got a story for you, that person would ask themselves, is this story for my audience? And that's a good question to ask. But unfortunately, podcasters, we get up Wednesday morning, we go, oh crap, I got to get an episode out. And then we get a random email from somebody that says a random person wants to talk to you about a random conversation. And you think, I'll jump on Riverside for 30 minutes, get this thing done, hope nobody watches it, and go to next week, which is a huge chunk of the podcasting space. And so, I mean, think about it. What other industry could we waste your time, the guest time, and the listener's time? We're wasting everybody's time in scale. Now, truth of the matter is, we're not wasting the time of the audience because the audience isn't listening to that episode or watching that episode because they don't care about that topic.
That's one of the things that I always tell people, that podcasts are like restaurants and doctor's offices, right? If there's not a waiting list, there's probably a reason you don't want to be there, right? If somebody is just starving for the guest to get this week's episode out, they haven't put much thought in it. They're not putting much editing.
Yeah, why would you want to be on a show that has no idea who they're going to have on Wednesday morning? You wouldn't listen to a show that would have no idea who they'd have on Wednesday morning. No news station's waiting around for somebody to call with a story. Yet somehow in podcasting, it changes the game. And one of those lies I get all the time is, well, podcasting's different. Podcasting's different. No, it's not. And this is really important. So yeah. And these people want to be on 100 podcasts. People call us, I want to be on 100 podcasts. No, you don't. I want 1 million downloads. No, you don't. What you want is impact. What you want is connection. Now, the right podcast has your audience, and the right message to that audience is gold. And podcasting makes that possible in ways we couldn't on all the other platforms. And that's where it gets cool. But that's not what the manifesto is about. This is preventing you from making some dumb moves. Or at least that's the goal.
And the opportunism, I want to dig into that a little bit, because I remember one of our clients, Eddie Yoon, wrote a book called Super Consumers. And I love how he says, in any market, there's the pioneers, right? The people that are there early, they'll be there late. They're the missionaries, right? Then you got the mercenaries, which come for the money, and that's fine, right? They're there to add to the battle. But then you've also got what he calls the looters, right? That are just there trying to make the money from it and really not adding anything to it.
Yep.
And as you talked about, the people robo pitching, that I love your show and like to be on it, right? I got those pitches for years and years, and I didn't even have a podcast.
Yep.
But yet their pitch is really good, and they're signing up a lot of people. Or the other one that I see is, I call them Trojan podcasts, right? I'd love to have you on my show, and it's nothing but a sales call. Right.
Yeah.
So what's your sense in there? How can you avoid being a victim to the opportunists?
Well, it's funny because grandma can help us all. Grandma who taught us, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. Hey, come on my show and 5 million potential customers will buy your book. No, they won't. Like, it's just not true. Like common sense. Let the greed get out of the way, and just look at it. Are you being the opportunist? Is the show producer being the opportunist? And you got to navigate that, and you got to be part of it, because it is so low-hanging fruit. And the thing that makes podcasting so cool is that anybody can do it. But the thing that brings out the opportunists is the fact that anybody can do this. So you got to look at the promise of what's going on. And yeah, there is use tech to leverage truth, but you don't use tech to alter truth or change truth. And yeah, the ones that are just sales pitches, the ones that are just, I read an ad, a guy said, I'm a guy said, like, you'd make $150K a year being a podcaster. And I'm like, well, how do you do that? That'd be fun. And his thing was, and he literally had on his website, spam people, tell them they're fantastic, get them on the show, pitch them to what you do. And if you close 1 out of every 10 at, 10,000 a month, you can make this. And by the way, we have a kit that'll teach you how to do that. But it does have a 14-day money back guarantee, and you'll never get this done by the end of the 14 days. So we make the money, and we go from there. So you just have to ask if it's too good to be true. You went back to the restaurant thing. If you walk at the restaurant, and the guy says, we have a $3.99 ribeye. Yeah, that's just not the way restaurants work. We have a 99-point Wine Spectator bottle of Merlot that I can give you a glass for 22 cents. No, you don't. No, you don't. And the opportunist, and the thing is, I want to be very clear. The opportunism is on both sides. The guest with content, that needs to be on your show. If I'm looking for a quick fix, shame on me. If you, the show, are looking for a quick fix, shame on you. And you just got to understand all these elements, and you got to go from there. You get new windows at your house, and 10 people come, and the quote for the windows is around $25,000. And then one guy comes and says, "I can do your windows for $300." No, you can't. Like, that's just the way it is. Like, you don't have a secret, you don't have a hack. You're just trying to get $300 from me.
That's a great observation, and what your grandma would tell you, right? There's greed and deception on both sides, and people should understand that.
On both sides. Mm-hmm. On both sides. And I got people, and then actually, there's a third, I don't have anything to talk about on my show. Great. Sign up for one of those podcast things, and you'll get a new guest every week. And all of a sudden you have something to talk about. Well, the thing is, 52 random people on Wednesday about random topics. They're an opportunist as well. And so, yeah, just get over it. Just get over it. If it seems too good to be true, talk to grandma, probably is.
When you said that, it made me think of one of the things that everybody's a best-selling author now on Amazon, right? Everybody's a best-selling author, and it seems like everybody is a top 1% podcast. And I love, Listen Notes is a great database for certain things, but the way they do their ranking, it's so true and so misleading, right? I remember Podcast Movement a couple of years ago talking to mutual friend Dave Jack about that. And, they always say your top 1% of all podcasts, right? And they include the 85% that are dead, and our point was, if that's true, then we all here are in the top 7% of the best looking people, the most aerobic people, the fittest people, because the other 93% are dead, right? But everybody wants to say, well, I'm top 1%, right?
I'd like to take this moment to tell the world that, Tom, you are a top 1%, Tom. So congratulations. And put that in the bio for all your social media postings and that kind of stuff. Declared by the Podcast Partnership as one of the top 1% Toms on the planet.
Put that all over the website.
Beautiful thing. I did this once. I was going to release this as a podcast, but unfortunately, I forgot the fact that I also have an audio version of the podcast, and I recorded it all very visually. I need to re-record it. But we were, I was on a call with a client. He said, "Oh yeah, our show's a 5% because of Listen Notes." And it was funny because my project manager just had this smirk on her face that I just know her well enough. So when we hang up, I'm like, "What's that smirk?" And she's like, "Paul, my husband, who does a show about caddies, is a top 20% podcast according to them, top 10% podcast according to them, and he never gets more than 20 downloads per episode." You know? And now the funny thing is my project manager's husband, we have the podcast partnership, four things. Number one, what do you want the show to do? Number two, how do we know the show's doing it? Number three, is the show doing it? Number four, how do we do it better? My buddy wants to do something in the firehouse. He's a firefighter in between fires. So they grab a couple of mics, he and a buddy talk about caddies. He's having a blast. How do you know that he's doing it? Because he's having a blast. You know, how can you do it better? Keep recording the show. He's having a blast. You know, doesn't pay for hosting because he does the, Spotify hosting thing, that kind of stuff, and he's a podcaster. I think he got onto some golf course for something freebie. I'm not necessarily sure about that, but yeah, that 10% thing. It's just because, and again, a 10% podcast, what does that mean? I'm back to the steakhouse. We're a 10% steakhouse. What does that mean? Throw out numbers like, come on, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And it goes back to, why are you trying to get on this show? What do you expect to get out of this show? And if what you're expecting to get out of the show is just practice talking to other people, then fine. Enjoy, practice talking to other people, but just don't expect to get rich off of it.
Yeah, don't expect random actions to give you results with that, and to start with the end in mind, right? If you're having a podcast to have fun, if you're guesting to have fun, then have fun, but then don't come back and say, well, I want to get rich, or it didn't convert. Well,
but I'd even be happy, Tom. I'd be happy with people who say didn't convert, because that means they actually attempted to convert something. Like most people just think, had this gal come in for some consulting. I said, she had like 300 plus shows. Like, tell me your best show. And so she told me her best episode, and it was with an author that I like. I'm like, great. I'll listen to the episode with the author. All good. I'm listening to the author, and I'm listening to the show, enjoying it. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I really like this guy. And he was talking about his book. I'm like, I should probably buy the book. The book's on the shelf behind me. Okay, I already have the book. But the conversation was so good that I reminded how much I love the guy. I finished the episode. I thought to myself, yeah, that guy's great. It's a great book. What did that have to do with her? Nothing. The guy came on the show and maybe sold the book to somebody who hadn't heard the book before, but it didn't serve her in any way. And if she were to say I didn't get any conversions, I bet you she sold some of the books. It was a great interview. It was a solid interview, but it had nothing to do with her or her business, because it was a random topic where they got the email, they did the interview, and they went from there. Great book, great author, great idea, nothing to do with the show. Stop it.
And sometimes people think, well, the reason that it didn't convert is because the show wasn't bigger, or I need bigger name guests or bigger shows.
Or they didn't do enough audiograms, Yeah, or they didn't say share.
Yeah, if I have a former president or a celebrity on my podcast, boom, everybody will listen to it and they'll share it. Or if I, as a guest, just get on bigger shows, well, that's what I need. And I'm like, if you're not converting on smaller shows, why would bigger shows work? And that old thing of, you can't say enough of the right thing to the wrong people. So make sure you're on the right show.
Well, and why should they promote you? If you were boring and you had nothing to say and you were the generic interview of the week, nobody gets up and gets really excited about promoting the generic interview of the week. Now, do you know the name Chalene Johnson? Do you know her at all?
I do.
Chalene calls and says, Paul, I want you on the show. Now, just getting on her show, that's an honor in and of itself. Chalene says, Paul, but here's the deal. I want content you've never talked about before. Now, Shalene's worthy of that content. And she said, and Paul, I want 60 days ownership of that content. So we talk about this on January 1st. You can't talk about anywhere else until March 1st. Great. So now Chalene can promote. Podcasting consultant Paul Colligan gave me a 60-day window on stuff that he can't talk about anywhere else. That's worth promoting. And what's even cooler, what's even smarter on Shalene's side, is, I have been on so many podcasts where people ask me, boy, the infantile circular reasoning of me coming on a podcast to ask if podcasting is a good idea is just ridiculous. But I've done hundreds of them. So they say, and I'll go and I'll practice my shtick and I'll do that thing, but I'm not going to promote, the idea that podcasting is a good idea. My audience would just poke their ears out with ice picks if I did that. But if I said one of the smartest people in the industry, Shalene, in this transaction that you should consider, got 60-day trial on some stuff that I spent the weekend writing for her. Here's where you click. So Shalene got a reason to promote. I got a reason to promote Shalene. I've gotten clients out of both of my things on her show. Everybody's won, but it wasn't just the same boring thing. Here's a clue. If the content is the same across 10 episodes, why should all 10 episodes promote it? Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a character. He's a fascinating folk. But I'll tell you, man, Gary goes on 5 book shows about his new book, and all 5 book shows are 5 different episodes of Gary being Gary. And, at least you get something different. And it's that opportunism again, Why should I go on the road? Why should I put on pants? If I can just talk to other people and, get a guy like Tom to get on 100 shows next month.
And if you look at it, Gary's also repurposing it because there's new ideas, right? And I'll point out, I'll do the shout out for Shalene. She's a Michigan State grad, right? So let's go Michigan here. But she is smart to do that because her audience gets content. And you went in there on a collaborative thing. And that's one of the things you talk about in the manifesto is, are you there as a partner in it? Or are you there as a transaction? And being a professional, right? From the standpoint, you took the time to make that content. You talked about the promotion of it beforehand. And then also even the little things like coordinating time and equipment and everything like that. It's like, are you there to do a transaction or start a relationship?
A client of ours was doing the interview show thing because that's what we thought he was supposed to do. And he was pretty sure that everybody who came on the show to interview, he would, they'd promote. And it did not work as well as he'd hoped. Worked better than we'd warned him it would, but it did not work as well as he'd hoped. What was funny was we had a mutual friend who, friend owed me a favor, friend owed him a favor. I said, of all the people you got on this season, I can't promise anything, but friend X will definitely promote the show. And I could say that I could say that with certainty. Now, here's the funny thing. Monday, the episode comes out. We email friend X, all the stuff, the audiograms, all those things. And we get back an autoresponder from friend X saying I'm on the first day of a 21-day sabbatical. Oops. And the funny thing was, there was nothing special about releasing that episode on that day. There was nothing there. We just didn't ask the guy, hey, look, we're looking at releasing it on April 14th. And I'm just making up a date there. Are you going to be around April 14th to promote that? Is that a good week for you to promote that? And the sad thing is somebody comes back for 3 weeks, they're cleaning everything up. They're messing everything up, and it could have gone a week early. Yeah. But just that conversation, just that topic, that assumption's got to go away. And the opportunism is just like, if you build it, they will come. Not true. You still got to promote, still got to market, still got to have a reason, still got to have a show, still got to have all these things.
Yeah. And if he would have talked about it from the very beginning, he probably would have promoted it while he was gone because got content now while I'm gone.
Yeah,
it's that idea of,
if we would have had 2 minute more conversation, it could have gone better.
And it's that idea of not only podcasts are scheduled out, the best ones, but also guests, right? They're not going to be able to record next week. And even if it goes live, like you said, April 14th, they might have something already planned in there. So make sure you have that conversation so both parties win on that. So earlier in life, I'm a better caddy than I am a golfer. And one of the things that always struck me between the hacks and the professionals was how much they worked, right? How much they crafted that, how much they prepared for it. The hack would just run up to the first tee and swing a ball, right? The pro was getting set beforehand. And I see the same thing in podcasting, right? It's work. And you talk about the preparation and the equipment, right? And not everybody sees that. They're like, well, it's a Zoom call, right? I'll just get on and do a Zoom call. What difference do you see that making?
Well, the funny thing is It makes the same difference it makes everywhere else, except somehow podcasting is exempt. You know, I have to make dinner tonight, and there's not a lot in the fridge. And so dinner is going to be creative at best if I don't decide to go to the store between now and dinner. It's just the way life is. No matter how much I want it, no how much I'm excited I'm for it, no matter how much I'm working it, the fridge is still pretty empty, and I've got to make dinner. And so what happens is there's this idea that somehow we enter this podcasting space-time continuum where all rules have changed and everything's different, and it's just not the case. You gotta work, you gotta leverage it. Now, I got an air fryer, and an air fryer can make things crispier faster than I can normally, and I got a microwave that can defrost some things. So, I got tools in that kitchen that'll speed up the process, but I still need something to cook. I still need a recipe. I still need a plan. I need to take that time to go and do it. And maybe, just maybe, I need to go to the store between now and dinner tonight. And it's the same thing with podcast. This idea that I will enter the kitchen and the food will be made unto itself. It's not the case. Got to do some prep.
And everyone will come and hear me talk about fried air, because that's all I got out of the air fryer. I love how you said podcasting is different, right? And I think people think that, well, it's so much different. The rules don't apply. And one of the specific points that you put in your manifesto was pay to play. And this has gotten to be more and more common, right? And I remember being at the podcasting conferences and people saying, well, you don't understand because podcasting doesn't fall under the laws and the rules. Thought that's interesting. That's an interesting defense. And what was it, a year ago or so, Bloomberg came out with that article, and then NPR picked it up, and they got the FTC on statement in there. And they did the article about payola and podcasting and said, you got to make it clear. This is Federal Trade Commission. If it's not clear whether or not it's an advertisement or an interview, that's deception, right? And I don't think people understand that. What's your take on the entire pay-to-play ecosystem that's starting to come up out there?
Well, first of all, it is there. It is
Yes.
massive. It is massive. Let me tell you how massive. Company calls me and says, Paul, just for promoting our interview service, we'll send you and your family out to New York to watch Hamilton. That's an expensive ticket. And this was not a commission. This was not sell 10 and we'll fly your family out. This was just start promoting us. Attach your name to this. Interesting conversation. Anybody who dangles Hamilton tickets, in front of me, I will certainly at least take the call. Take the call. Funny thing is, I go, so tell me about some of your success stories. And they go, oh, we're really great at getting people on show X. I won't say what show X was, but the show, I'll tell you this, is on fire. And the show is known for getting 7 people a week. And funny thing is I know the guy who runs that show. I know him well. And while we're chatting, I open up Skype, and this particular person happens to be online. And I tell this particular person, hey, what's it like working with X? Valid question. He responds, people, this is a company that was going to fly me and my family to New York for Hamilton tickets. We're talking like 8 to 10 grand just to get me to play with them.
You don't live in New Jersey. This is across the country.
I live in Portland, Oregon. Yeah. I live in Portland, Oregon. And he responds, never heard of them. Their best success story, the guy had never heard of. Now, it was funny, about 2 minutes later, he messaged me again in Skype. He goes, but man, they charge a lot, and so, the whole thing is a scam. So it's huge, it's there, and it pries on the ignorant. It's a scam just like every other scam out there. And so my big thing is, yeah, there's the legal, and yeah, there's the lock them up, and there's the hang them by the toenails, and there's all this stuff, but also just don't make a dumb mistake like that. Just don't do that to yourself, because it's ridiculous. And don't think, again, we podcast for our audience. And if I get paid to put somebody on my show that's not for my audience, I am doing myself a disfavor. and sure, would I spend a weekend starting up a show just so I could get Hamilton tickets? Maybe, but but not my show, not my audience, not who I am, and that's the issue with the whole game. There are others who will take them to court, and for love of, yeah, please do, but also just back to what we said at the beginning. If it seems too good to be true, it's there. Navigating the opportunism. We're going to get you. You pay us the right money. We're going to get you on the shows. And if we have to pay them a little scratch to get you on the show, great. Any show, what's your favorite late night show?
I don't stay up late night, right? I would say Leno was the last time I was doing it, but they'll promise me to get me on the Jay Leno show.
Right. Well, and the thing is, though, if you were watching Jay Leno, and it's Hayden Christensen from Star Wars, and it's some folk singer that you absolutely love, and then it's Barney Jacobson from 121 Jones Street. I don't care about Barney, and you hang up and you go away. So it's not like Barney Jacobson got the attention that he thought he was going to get. If anything, he got millions and millions of people going, yeah, I don't care who Barney is, and flipping off the channel. One thing, most podcasters, it's funny, most podcasters don't know. Most podcasters don't know that you can view the consumption of an episode, how far they go in. So I wrote this piece on Medium, and in the show notes, put a link to my Medium. It's paulcolligan.medium.com. I've got an article about a client we had, JJ Virgin. JJ comes to us. It was beautiful. JJ comes to us, the whole flip side of this. And JJ says, Paul, the interviews are killing me. I'm hating them, and I need to do more. I'm like, okay, don't do that to yourself. It's not worth it. But here's the funny thing. We were looking at her stats. At the time, when JJ was interviewing, people were only listening to about 30% of the show because there was this rotation of people in our industry who were all on each other's podcast. They were just bored. So when JJ would do the interview that was sucking the life out of her that she hated, she'd get a 30% consumption. When JJ was JJ being JJ, which she's very good at, her consumption was in the 80 to 90%. So this idea that I have to go through this money, this idea that I have to pay someone to set me up with this, the idea that I have to, go and get my hair cut Tuesday at 10 because I'm going to be on some show, all that goes away if you really know who your audience is, and you really know what it is that they want, and you really know what it is that you're doing about it. So pay to play, yes, but do you need to pay to play? If a guy came to my door and said, hey, by the way, that air fryer you're going to be using tonight for dinner, you got to pay a license for that. Oh, well, it's air fryer. Air fryers make life easier. Here's my $50 air fryer license. No, and I don't know if that analogy works. Maybe you'll cut that out. But the fact of the matter is, we don't need to make this complicated. But pay for play is a thing, and pay for play usually is, the promise that appeals to the user who wants something that's too good to be true.
It's interesting. You say it plays on the ignorant and, like we said before, the greedy, from the standpoint of, if it was that easy, to get on the Jay Leno show, right? It wouldn't be the Jay Leno show, right? If you can pay to be on there, so can the 18-year-old life and business coach.
Anybody who's listening, this is a great subline, subtitle for your podcast. If it was easy to get on this show, it wouldn't be this show. That alone. You ever listen to a podcast where this guy's been making the podcast interview rounds, and I'm so excited to have him. Oh man, like, kill me now.
And I call them Groundhog's Day interviews. Right. And there's a place for those. Tony Robbins, right? When he launches a new book, he'll go out on different radio stations, and every radio station, he talks to them for 5 minutes, and it's the same spiel for 5 minutes. All right. That's fine. You do that on a podcast. Somebody likes you the first time, and they're like, I'm going to listen to Tom's next interview. And they find you. And it's like, he says the same thing over and over. He's got, he's the comedian with 5 minutes of material. I'm not following him. Right. So more is not better. Better is better.
And imagine that focus, that attention. The person who told you, I want to get on 100 shows this month, they don't have the long game in mind. because if they had the long game in mind, they would say something like, well, I mean, let's take 100, let's divide it by 12. I want to be on, 8 shows a month. I want to be on 2 a week for the next year. That's an entirely different thread. That's an entirely different trend. And again, what do you want out of these interviews? If you're the type of person who will sell more, who has proven that you will sell more, who knows, not feels, not hopes, not bought on a $7 ebook that they will convert more. If at my website I can list links to 100 different podcasts I've been on, then fine, go on everything that moves. But what are you trying to do out of this? And is it worth it? Is it worth it? There's an old moniker in marketing, half my marketing budget's working, I just don't know which half. And the fact of the matter is, if you do 500 podcast episodes, one of them you might hit a home run for. But how about this? How about just doing the one that you hit the home run for, not to the other 499, and not waste people's time, your time, audience time, interviews time. Take that time and create a new show.
And in the manifesto, you talk about having a clear, trackable strategy, right? What's worse than going on 499 shows and none of them working? Going on 500 and not knowing which one worked and why it worked, right? Because now you've seen success, but you can't reproduce it.
Right. And let's speak to that tracking for a minute, because if implemented correctly, effective tracking could change the whole game for everybody. I was on a call with someone who was part of a network, and this person was thoroughly convinced that his downloads were X and the paycheck he was getting was Y. And we just ran the numbers, which means that the show was at $186 CPM. That's
about 9 times the multiple.
Yeah. And this wasn't Tim Ferriss I was chatting with, but the fact of the matter is he was thoroughly convinced. And I told him one of the numbers somewhere is off. Maybe it's the check you're getting. Maybe it wasn't a $3,500 check. Maybe it was a $350 check. Maybe it was a $35 check. Maybe it was a $3.50 check. But here's what's interesting. Clear tracking. Let's say I offer some sort of course about podcast guesting, and I don't have one, so don't worry. And I were to come on your show and I were to go, the expanded edition of the Podcast Guesting Manifesto is available. And then I give you a PDF that has your show's artwork in the bottom right-hand corner, and you tell them where to get it, the download. And the link in the PDF is to the program that's set up to an affiliate program. And then I call you in 6 months and go, where should I send the check? Is it Tom Schwab personal? Is it Interview Valet? Is it some holding company somewhere? Do you want Bitcoin? What do you want? If I did that, go on 100 shows and I write 10 checks and 5 of those checks are big, those are the 5 shows I go on next year, because those are the results. And those 5 shows, I can go, you're getting about a 20 CPM for your show right now. And fact of the matter is, with the conversion that we did last year and whatnot, I could probably bump that to 50. Do you want me to have back on the show? If the right guest comes on the right show with the right message, and it makes the right show generate better money, everybody wins. So tracking is not just for you, tracking's for the industry in some really, really cool ways. But this idea that you end a show with, I believe I'm going to make money by telling people to sign up for my free newsletter, or this kind of nonsense just has got to stop, and it's got to stop now.
Well, and it's interesting because any other marketing, we would be getting data along the way, right? When you're doing Facebook marketing, direct mail, whatever it is, direct response, you're getting data so that you can continually get better and better and better, right?
I got to tell you a story here. Pre-podcasting, I was in the web template game. And we spent a lot of money on ads, Google ads, and spent a lot of money, but everything was tracked through. I knew each word, how much each word made me. And what's funny was there were a couple of keywords in Google that made me no money. I had never sold a single template as a result of that. But here's the funny thing. My competition was buying all the words I was buying. And by me spending $1 on a word that made me no money, my competition would spend $500 on a word that made them no money. And they slowly stopped advertising, and I won by a little bit of diversion and a little bit of centrifuge. Oh yes, Paul does that kind of thing. And so the fact of the matter is, yeah, track on purpose because of what it allows you to do, what it enables you to do, and if you're not tracking, why are you doing this? If Facebook called and said, just send us $5,000, you'll get some clients. We promise. Like, that would never work in a million years. Yet somehow in podcasting, send me $5,000 and, I'll get you on the shows that will, get you $10,000 in income. Trust me, I know where it's coming from. We somehow allow that because podcasting is different.
And the answer when it doesn't convert is more interviews or bigger interviews. Well, if it's not converting at here, just doubling down, in the Navy used to call it doubling down on stupid.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to say there's a third reason. The third reason it didn't work was because, they claim Interview Valet did them wrong. And that's the thing. That's where all steps in this process has to be honest and ethical. If I tell you, don't worry, I got a tracking system, but I just really hope the tracking system will figure itself out, and you give me on the right show, and then I call you back and, it didn't work. Well, you said you had a tracking system. Well, maybe. Yeah. So that's the thing. It's no longer just two people to blame. There's like 3 or 4 people to blame now for everything.
Well, it's a partnership, right? I always say, we guarantee what we can control. You got to do the interview.
We're the podcast partnership. We get it. Yep.
Well, Paul, what final thoughts do you have on the manifesto? What feedback have you gotten? What final words do you want to share with people on the Podcast Guesting Manifesto?
Number one, just be honest with yourself. A lot of people say, well, I don't want to be the next Joe Rogan. But if I filled them full of sodium pentothal, they want to be the next Joe Rogan. So be honest with yourself. What do you want out of this? And then, do everything based on that. If you think podcast guesting, which is a method, which is a viable, real method, if you think podcast guesting is going to get you there, run your idea through the manifesto and see if it rings true or if it doesn't. If all this stuff is scary, does Paul has a bone to pick? Note, I don't have anything to sell here. And if anything, you guys, I've been around the sites, you guys have a system where I could outsource podcast guesting to my client base. If I wanted to, I could make this the big suck up call and, we could all make money and that kind of stuff, but it's not. What am I trying to do here? This particular case, I'm trying to help the industry. So I'm not selling anything. There's no answer to the manifesto or anything like that if you follow it, it's going to make me a few bucks. So go through it and go from there. But finally, 4 questions. I alluded to this earlier. What do you want your show to do? How will you know that your show is doing it? Is the show doing it? How do you do it better? Run everything through those 4 questions and you'll be at a good place.
Those 4 questions worked on any marketing. They worked 50 years ago. They'll work 50 years from podcast guesting.
It's funny. I did a book called Never Go Shopping When You're Hungry. And Never Go Shopping When You're Hungry is basically 100 pages about those 4 questions I just asked you. So if you're the type who needs 100 pages on that, go to Amazon. It's out there, or just take the 4 questions. But yeah, it's there. But again, the reason it works on everything and has worked for the last 400 years is because podcasting is not as different as a lot of people like to claim it to be. So find the right vendor. If you need to sound like $1 million, find the right editor to make you sound like $1 million. If you need to get on the right shows, pay somebody, the right amount of money to get you on the right shows. If you need to have, 8,000 audiograms so that you can post something on TikTok every 35 seconds, pay somebody what it costs to have the 8,000 audiograms so you can post on TikTok every 35 seconds. What do you need? What do you want the show to do? How do we know that it's doing it? Is it doing it? How do we do it better?
Words of wisdom. Paul, thank you for publishing the manifesto. Thank you for sharing your wisdom here. Look forward to seeing you the next time in real life at one of the upcoming meetings here. And if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way, if you go to podcastpartnership.com, that'll take you to a link tree. or and a Linktree competitor that'll give you the links to all my social and books and past presentations we've done and that kind of thing. And then you could follow the flow from there.
Excellent. We'll put that in the show notes also. Thanks, Paul. What's ordinary to you is amazing to others.